I was born in Moses-Lettingen Hospital on May 7th, 1959. Problem with the birth, and I was a blue baby. And they decided they needed to baptize me on the spot. Unfortunately, the only male in the hospital was Father John Senecal from Crown Point. So, they adapted to it. He was the priest on one side of the table, and he was my godfather on the other. The cleaning lady that was in the hospital that day became my godmother. I never met either one of them. Born into a little less than middle-class Irish Catholic family. I'd already been baptized and went through the First Communion. Came each week with my mom. My dad, although a believer, he stayed out in the car and read his baseball digest and smoked his Camel cigarettes. Came each week, religiously. No pun intended. Everything's going along perfectly normal. Each week my mom came to Mass. Here we go. Until March 22nd, 1971. I was 11 years old and my dad died. My mother was a rock. She never budged. So we still continued on to Mass each and every night. It's Sunday night, 7:30 Mass, which I used to have here. Until I was probably 14 or 15. Myself and a bunch of my friends devised this heroic grand plan where if you showed up at 7:30 Mass about 25 minutes to 8, Mass would be going. One or two of us could run in and grab a handful of bulletins, stuff them in our pockets, run downtown and be teenage boys. But when you got home that night, you could prove you'd been to church. So all the way through high school, it kept going that way. And I was probably 4 or 5 years out of school, around 1982. I was very concerned, very non-interested in the way that the Mass was being run here. A lot of you people from back then know the prayers for the conversion in Russia and China. And it was just put a sour taste in my mouth. So I made the conscious decision to walk away from the church, and I guess at the time, I still believed in everything. I was walking away from God also. Fast forward to the summer of 2000. My mom was working 40 hours a week at the fort, 83 years old, and legally blind. Towards Labor Day, she wasn't feeling too well. And she said, something's not right. So she went to a doctor's appointment here in town, and they did tests, and she had to go over to Burlington and be admitted for more tests. And it was a cold, rotten, rainy, windy October evening. And we're sitting there in a room, and her doctor, who was from the Vermont Center for Cancer and Disorders of the Blood, Dr. Paul Unger, walked in the room. And he sat down on the bed, very conversant fellow, jovial, visited with us for a while, and he said, Mrs. Fitzgerald, you have leukemia. And he went on to explain that there was a chronic leukemia and acute leukemia, how one is treatable and the other one at that time wasn't really treatable. So we're sitting on the edge of the bed waiting for him to say she had the chronic. And he said, unfortunately, you have acute leukemia. We can try and treat it now. It's not proven. It's going to be a long road and there's no guarantees. Or you can just have comfort care. We'll keep you comfortable. Everything's going to go good. You will be pain-free. And without a hesitation, she said, I want the comfort care. I'm not going to do anything I'm not guaranteed to come out of, and I want to be at peace. So he walked out of the room that night, and she said to me, we got to talk, McGee. When she called me McGee, I knew it was serious. I knew I'd better listen. I'd heard it all my life. So I went over to the side of the bed, and she said she knew what was happening. Didn't know how long she had, but she was at peace with it. She said, what concerns me most is you will not be able to receive communion at my funeral. And that was just like a slap in the face. And I assured her that I would get it done. I left that night by myself, not knowing how I was going to get it done, but I knew I was going to get it done. I was driving down Spear Street in Charlotte. And on the right-hand side of the road in Charlotte, there's a little church called Our Lady of Mount Carmel Catholic Church. I used to date a girl that lived over there, been by it 100 times, saw it, saw these signs out in the front of it. Just knew I didn't need it. I was flying free. I didn't need any help. Well, going by this night, that same sign was in the front yard. It was like there were spotlights on it and just everything lit up by that sign. And it said, "Inactive Catholics, come home, we miss you." That was a slap in the face turned into a slug. I mean, that hit me hard. So I came home that night, really emotionally distraught. The next morning I came down to St. Mary's and knocked on the door of the rectory, figuring Father Bill would be here, and he was on vacation. It was a visiting priest. He answered the door, and to this day I don't know who he was, but a very, very, very good man. And he said, asked me what I was there for, and I told him. And I said, my mom was diagnosed with a terminal illness last night. I've been away from the church for 18 years, and her only concern is that I couldn't go to confession at her funeral. So he heard my confession, 18 years as a teenager and a young man, middle-aged man, and I figured I was going to be over here for 3 weeks saying my penance. But I told him the whole story about staying at home, taking care of my mom and all that, and he looked me in the eye and said, "You've done your penance." So, Christmas Eve, 2000, my mom passes away. Tough day. But the proudest moment of my life was coming up here to receive communion that day. After that, I was struggling with it, coming back to Mass. And Bob Palandrani Sr., most of you here know him, he convinced me to go out to Blessed Sacrament in The Hague. There's a very vibrant young priest there at the time by the name of Father George Fleming, who ironically went to the same seminary as Father Chris, and they knew each other. And Father George he was still a very good Mass, but very jovial. It was easy to get back into the Mass, get involved with it. And I kept going and going and going. Eventually, they started taking up the collections. Then they had me read the Passion on Palm Sunday for an indoctrination. And then I became a trustee, and I was getting very, very, very involved in the church. And I got to thinking, I was driving 12 miles each way to get out there and back when I lived less than a half a mile from this church. So I started sticking my nose in around here again. Father Bill was still here. And it was very shortly after that Father Kevin arrived. Very dynamic priest. It was easy to listen to him talk. You could absorb it. You weren't the little boy that needed the lifesavers in the front pew because you could concentrate on it. And I became very much more enamored with the church, getting back involved with the church and getting back involved with God. And Junie LaPointe comes over one day, and I was just nondescriptly sitting back there in the same pew I've sat in for 50 years. There's a little pew back there. Got a chip off the top of it on the left-hand side as you come in. And he said, "Say, you're here an awful lot. Would you mind helping us with the collections?" And we're getting more and more and more involved again. And then Father Chris asked me last year to get back up here and start speaking at the pulpit. Again with the Passion on Palm Sunday. But somehow I always get thrown into that. But it's just been a renaissance, if you will, a rebirth, and it's my story. And it's one of the few stories I've ever told where I didn't lie. This is all real stuff. And I am much more in tune with the church. I'm very active in the church. I'm back in love with God again. And it's just, I'm really enamored with the way this place is being run. And I'm very, very happy to be back. And Father, one thing I want to say is I hope I am here just as long as you are. I want you to be here longer than me, actually.
Thank you.
So everybody can enjoy this. I thank you.
That was excellent. Thank you.